We acknowledge that we are streaming to you today from the traditional lands of the Ghana and Nudgeri peoples, and that we respect their spiritual relationship to their country.
We also acknowledge the Ghana people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region, the Nudgeri people as the traditional custodians of the mid-north region of South Australia, and we respect that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Ghana and Nudgeri people today.
We extend that respect to all First Nations people watching and sharing with us today. Hi, I'm Sam,
I'm Jacob.
and we are moderators from MOD. You might say, what is MOD? MOD stands for Museum of Discovery. We are a future-focused museum that explores art, science, and innovation. We're usually based at the corner of North Terrace and Morford Street in Adelaide, but right now we are coming to you live from our homes into yours.
And maybe this is your first time joining us today and you're wondering, what is Mod TV? Well, Mod TV is the latest venture for Mod, with live content streaming directly to your screens 4 days a week. Here at Mod TV Lounge, we will be engaging with the themes of connection, well-being, and disruption, and looking deeper into our exhibits, hosting games, and much more.
And today we're exploring our online exhibition, Life Interrupted. Specifically, we'll be taking a look at our exhibit, It's My Pleasure, as well as how we interact with algorithms and more broadly in our lives. To help us do that, we're pleased to welcome Owen Churches.
Now, Owen is a senior statistician in the Government of South Australia, where he works for the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute. His work spans both the mathematical and political aspects of using government data to help make decisions. For his 2018 Churchill Fellowship, he spent 6 weeks in Europe studying the ethics of automated decision making in government. Before joining the public sector, Owen did his PhD in neuroscience at the University of Cambridge and worked in industry and academia.
And in an attempt to learn more about data ethics and share cake with others working in this space, he convenes an artificial intelligence and ethics book club once a month that you're all welcome to join. So please welcome Owen. And as Owen joins the conversation, I'd like to remind everyone who's watching, you can join our chat by putting in some comments or questions in the Twitch chat stream, and we'll try and get them to the conversation today. Hi, Owen.
G'day. Hey, Sam. Hey, Jacob. Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely our pleasure. Can you explain a little bit to viewers about It's My Pleasure? What is it?
Oh, sure. It's an idea that Hannah Keech from UniSA and Shimon Dadain, who's now at Melbourne Uni, and I came up with a little while ago, using data that we'd collected as part of an experiment in which we'd asked people to say the next word they thought of when we gave them a prompt. And that's a pretty classic sort of psychological test. The twist was that we were recording their brain activity while they were making those choices. And from that, we hoped we'd work out a way to predict what word they were about to say based on their antecedent brain activity. One of the outcomes of the study, though, was that we ended up with this huge data set of words that people said they thought of after we gave them a particular prompt. And toward the end of 2018, when Mod were looking at putting on the hedonism exhibition that ran like last year, started almost a year ago, there was this call that said, hey, if you are interested in having an exhibit to do with pleasure, let us know. Of course, pleasure was one of the prompts we'd given our participants. So we had all this really rich data about what words different people associated with the word pleasure. So I'd moved on since doing that original neuroscience study. I was now working in government, and one of the things that I was really interested in was the use of recommendation engines, the sort of algorithm that gives you up next videos in YouTube or suggestions in Netflix or pretty much any other online channel. And one of the things I started thinking about when I looked at the call for the hedonism exhibition was that all these ideas, right, are ways of delivering us more and more perfect pleasures, right? Facebook friends, foods to eat, they're all just different types of pleasures. And having this data set, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to build a recommendation engine for pleasure? Like, cut the friends, cut the food, just cut straight to the chase and have a recommendation engine for pure pleasure. So we did it. We wrote a fairly generic recommendation engine by conventional standards, using the data from our experiment as a skeleton. We seeded it with choices that participants made at the beginning. So if you say, I like the beach and I like the outdoors, the next thing it might suggest is the hills or swimming, right? Because both the hills is associated with being outdoors and swimming is associated with the beach. And so the more and more information you give the recommendation engine, as it suggests things and you get to choose whether you would or wouldn't find them pleasurable, the better it gets at learning what it is you actually like. And the idea was to actually show that this is both one sort of ridiculous, that a computer could learn what it is that most gives you pleasure, but also sort of terrifying. And it was really interesting hanging out at Mod when people were using it in the gallery and watching people go, oh, I do like that. And this sort of delight turning to curiosity, turning to terror, as people spent more and more time in the algorithm. It was fun.
Yeah, that must have been an interesting situation for you to see your research and your data playing out live in the space of the exhibition.
It was amazing. It was a fantastic opportunity. It's not the sort of thing that scientists normally get to do, to watch people interact with your data in that sort of an environment. It was a really once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm really grateful.
And were there any discoveries from the work being in the exhibition that you came to?
Yeah, so there, I think I discovered a lot in the journey to make it an exhibit to begin with. I learned a lot more about design than I'd ever hoped to. And I learned a lot more about my own ethical sort of choices along the way, because it would have been super tempting to run the exhibit, not just making its choices using the pre-registered data that we had ethically collected as part of the experiment. It would have been very tempting to have the exhibit collecting data itself. I mean, because the more data you fed it, the better it would get. And we decided not to, because one of the points we really wanted to make was about the terrifying immorality of the way the algorithms are sort of shaping our choices, constraining our choices, and sort of ultimately shaping the way we live our lives. And we wanted to be part of the solution, not the problem. So making that choice felt like a big deal to us at the time. Yeah.
Now, you've just talked about creating solutions, and I want to know about potential solutions you had to come up with along the way to problems that arose whilst developing this, whether that's in the original study you were doing or whether it was in bringing that data set into your exhibit at Mod. What were the kinds of difficulties you experienced in bringing this project to fruition?
Yeah, we found like there were some interesting technical difficulties along the way in realizing that no data, I mean, it's the sort of thing that statisticians have to realize over and over again, but no data is ever in as clean and tidy a shape as you think it is. So we did a lot of work to re-clean all the data to make sure that words were spelt consistently. So, I mean, some people are just like bad at spelling, so there's that. There's also like accepted like multiple spellings that we ended up with. And so we only discovered these at first through trial and error, wherein people found that they were being recommended both color as something they enjoyed with a U, and also like as in would you find more pleasure in color with a U or color without a U? And at first people were like, ooh, is this like a subtle like next level like twist question? Like do you prefer British or Americanized English? But we didn't mean it like that. We meant it like just as in the concept, the phenomena of light refracted in a particular way to create the experience of color. And it really upset, like, because like the words associated with it weren't words associated with British or American English. So we had to standardize spellings. And yeah, so I mean, it was an interesting sort of statistical problem of the data being bad, well, the data being dirty, but it became this really interesting problem in a interactive exhibit sense when some of our early pilot testing participants were like, that's really, I love how you did that. And we were like, we didn't mean that.
I love that. That was totally not the kind of complications that I was envisioning. So that's a great insight into how you build algorithms, the nitty gritty of that. And one thing that I'm particularly interested to learn from you is about the problems that arise in trying to create these kind of algorithms. I'm sure that most people watching are most familiar with these kinds of recommendation algorithms through things like Netflix and Spotify. But what I really want to know is what kind of limitations exist in these algorithms and how they generate recommendations for us?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So recommendation design is a super active area of statistical work in the abstract, in the academic sense, but obviously it's spurred by everyone wanting to get a job as a data scientist at Spotify, right? I mean, it's a great and really interesting application of this mathematical process. So recommendation engines are an interesting idea, and they solve the problem of having too much information, which is a kind of a super 20th century like problem, right? Too much information, right? But that's what a recommendation does. It helps you filter out not things that are necessarily bad, but are things that are less optimal solutions to the query that you have. And they're built in a couple of different sort of basic ways. You can build them by knowing a lot about each item, and not just knowing a lot, but have data on each item, a lot of data on each item. So if you were building a Netflix recommendation engine, you might want to know lots of things like the director of each movie, the length of each movie, the actors in each movie, the language in each movie, right? These would be itemized. And you would have to have all that information for every movie. And then once someone had said, oh, I like that one in particular, you could find, and it's a really interesting mathematical solution, you could find other movies who have this vector through this sort of imaginary space that's super similar to the one they've already said they like. If you don't have that, right, if you don't have all that data to begin with, you can take the other approach, which is just to watch what people like. And it's a fairly interesting and tends to be a pretty robust finding that if I like the same one, if I have one thing in common with you, I'm more likely to have another thing in common with you than I am to have with someone that I don't already have something in common with. And the more that we have in common, the more we're likely to have more in common. And you can start drawing what's strictly called a graph. There's a network of people based on how they have things in common, or to turn around the other way, which is what we used in It's My Pleasure, you can draw things, in our case, words, or in Netflix's case, movies, that are joined when two people like the same word. And from that, you end up with, first of all, just points joined by lines, and then those points joined into triangles, and then lots of triangles joined together. And eventually you end up with this really complicated network.
Wow. Sorry, Sam. I was just going to say quickly, do you find examples where these like enigmas in the algorithm machines, for example, like films that are polarizing and the algorithm can't really figure out consistently if the same two people could like it? Do you find those kind of enigmas exciting as a statistician?
So exciting, right? So all the really cool applied work, of course, is not published at the moment, which is annoying. But there's this sort of rumor, this sort of myth that goes around the sort of network science community of what happened when Spotify got access to the entire Beatles back catalogue. And the legend goes that Spotify were really interested in this because they'd been in negotiations with Apple Music for like a long time, and it was a big deal. And they thought, this is really going to like reset the recommendation network like a lot. So the statisticians were really looking very, very carefully at the network. And what happened was nothing at all. It didn't reset the network in any possible way because everyone listens to the Beatles, wow. Right? If you were really into like mid-90s speed metal, you probably listen to the Beatles, right? If you were really into like late 80s West Coast hip hop, yeah, probably listen a bit to the Beatles, right? And of course, if you're into 60s and 70s Liverpool rock, yeah, you listen to the Beatles. The point is everyone listens to the Beatles. And so the effect of the Beatles is just perfectly smeared across the entire network of modern music. It's everywhere.
I love that.
So that's the smear effect. You've got these so there's the issue of the commonality, or if something that everyone loves or engages with. And then, what about things that some people love and some people hate? So the other extreme, I guess.
Yeah, right. So you need that in order for the network to work. If everyone loves everything, then the whole thing becomes undifferentiated. And what's delightful is how reliable we are in generally agreeing with other people. The problem is that once you get your recommendations from a recommendation engine, the effect, saying then that people continue to like the things that other people like, is this slight sort of statistical fallacy, because you're only giving them those options, right? Unless you build a recommendation engine that deliberately sometimes gives really bad recommendations. And so legend has it that occasionally all these channels, right, Netflix, Facebook, whatever, will occasionally throw aberrant suggestions, literally in order to build data on whether their true recommendations are any more valid than guesswork.
That's really interesting. And I guess, you've touched on this perhaps, and also to go back to the opportunity for you to see your research play out in the public realm live as part of the exhibition. What do you think it says about their collection and use of data and how comfortable people are with that.
Yeah, it says everything, doesn't it? And this is kind of the big journey, I think, that we're on as a society now, is understanding that we're giving this information, right, about the things we like, the things we watch, the things that we enjoy, the things that give us pleasure. And we give this away in order to be given tailored information, tailored suggestions for more consumption. And it's a trade-off that we may or may not make explicitly. It's entirely possible that some people are making this in a really informed manner, like they've really thought through the personal and societal implications and have gone, you know what, I'm down with it. But I guess the thing that I've started really exploring as a government statistician is the phenomenon in which that sort of individual choice might not actually be the most appropriate way to work anymore. There are lots of other technologies in society that we use, but that are regulated. We fly planes and we take pharmaceuticals, but in Australia, you can't buy a ticket to go on an unsafe plane. In Australia, you can't buy from a pharmacist unsafe medicine. All planes have to be inspected, have to be regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority, and pharmaceuticals are tested by the government regulator. And to some extent, that takes away the need for individuals to make the choice. Like if you wanted, you could run an airline that was way cheaper than Qantas if you dodged safety. And people would, if left to their own devices, make the choice to go on that plane. They would make that trade-off, right? And for some people, that might be, from their own perspective, the best trade-off. But as a society, we've said, no, that's not a choice we're going to give people. We're going to insist that the only planes are safe planes. And the thing I'm really interested in government is moving to a point wherein we say, no, the only algorithms we're going to have society exposed to are safe algorithms that not just recommendation engines, but all the algorithms that impact our lives in profound ways, not just in our consumption of food and friends and films, but the roads we drive on that are we're directed through by Google Maps, the information results that are returned to us through search engines. All these things are creating remarkable social impact. And to that extent, I feel like society that is through its government should have an appropriate regulator to make sure that it's safe.
We make a very compelling argument. I have nothing to argue with that. I would love to, as we near the end of our conversation, find out what's coming up next for you in terms of work, research, and ideas that you're exploring.
So I work at SAMRI now, the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute. I work with a small group of government statisticians who are helping the health system better utilise its data. And it's a really interesting journey of working with a system that collects a huge amount of information and for all sorts of mostly political, that is non-technical reasons, hasn't used it in all its effectiveness for a really long time. So I'm becoming less of a hands-on statistician and often a sort of a data nurse, talking through all the really powerful stakeholders, through the process that it takes to take their raw information, data, and turning it into something meaningful that they can use to help make the lives of their users better.
Wow, yeah, I think it's certainly been one of the most eye-opening things that we've been talking about today is those algorithms that go so much further than just our entertainment in our lives. I think a lot of people, that's where we come from when we think about algorithms and things like recommendations. But of course, talking about pharmaceuticals and planes and infrastructures, yeah, it sounds like there's so much happening, and there is going to be so much more happening. I mean, so much more that we maybe don't know about as well. And now that everything is fluctuating so much.
Yeah, totally. Look, I appreciate that to some extent there are some decisions that we may as a society think, yeah, look, a machine could make that, you know, YouTube recommendations. To some extent, I might say actually even that could be incredibly dangerous. There's a super interesting evidence that YouTube recommendation algorithm is at least partly responsible for the outcome of the 2016 presidential election in the United States. Also potentially outbreaks of infectious diseases in the South Pacific. So almost anything can get really out of hand. Machines are really good at scaling up really quickly. That's why we use them. The problem is they can scale up to really terrifying things accidentally, really quickly. I think, though, your point about like infrastructure choices, health spending choices, like, these are the things that I work most closely with in government. And yeah, I think the degree to which government is wonderfully using data to make decisions is something that as a society isn't well enough understood, and we should talk about it a lot more. And, you know, we have regulators within government on government activity in all sorts of other areas, right? We have an ombudsman in South Australia who handles all sorts of other things. We have complaints commissioners for all sorts of things. I think it'd be a really interesting and really progressive thing as a society if we had a regulator for government algorithms, someone tasked with ethically overseeing the use of algorithms by government.
That's incredible. Yeah, it seems radical, but it also seems achievable. But a great idea. Now we've had a question come through from one of our viewers, and they've asked if you're allowed to answer hypothetically. Are there any interesting ways that SA Health could be using data for COVID that we might not have heard of yet?
Yeah. Yes. And I would say I've actually been super impressed by the willingness in South Australia of political leaders, not just politicians, but chief executives across the board, to engage very, very quickly with the scientific community and with people like me inside government. Pretty much everyone I know who's a statistician in government has spent the last 6 weeks doing very little else except understanding and modelling the future of COVID in South Australia. And I've been really impressed with the degree to which our leaders have actually taken the time to listen as well. So yeah, the short answer is great question, and yes, there is. And I hope that everyone continues to listen to scientists when all of this finishes.
That's a great point as well. And if people are interested in finding out more about what you do and about this field, where would you suggest that they look?
Well, Sam, great question. As you said at the beginning, I do run a book club here in South Australia that we have people join in from all around the world online, and we read only artificial intelligence ethics books. it's a pretty niche book club. But if you are interested in the ethics of data, the morality of artificial intelligence, the way our society, our laws, our philosophy and ways of thinking are being impacted by the use of technology, then hit me up, find me on Twitter. That might be the easiest way. And you're more than welcome to get involved. We're a delightful and friendly bunch.
Wonderful. This has been such a enlightening and exciting chat with you today, Owen. We'd really like to thank you for taking the time to join us online today and give us your insight into the field and the work you've done with MOD in the past.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Owen. That was Owen Churches. And so there's a whole lot of stuff there, Jacob. That was really interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. And I think I kind of went in directions that I wasn't expecting, when we kind of went into the government side of things. I was just like, oh my God, there's so many more algorithms in our world that I wasn't even thinking of when we started this conversation.
That's right. I think I'm gonna be swimming around in my head about a lot of thoughts. About a lot of what was said today, and I might do that while we check in on and throw to our next segment. Our next segment is checking in with the team at Modcraft to see what our visitors have been creating and how how they're responding to our provocation about nature needing to be natural or perhaps not.
Now, this is happening at our Mod TV Games channel, but we're going to host that here on this stream, so you don't need to go anywhere. But I'll give you a note that sometimes when we change our stream, it can get stuck on the holding page. So if you find yourself stuck on the holding page, just give your browser a refresh and you should be with us on our Modcraft channel.
And then we'll be back around 5 o'clock to let you know what's happening over the rest of the week. Thanks for tuning in tonight, everybody. It's been great chatting with Owen Churches and also checking out Modcraft with Debbie and Josh.
If you'd like even more games, you can head over to Modcraft right now. Our realm is open until 7 p.m. tonight and also Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Check it out and build your dream garden with your friends and our very own moderators.
And we'll be back here at Mod TV Lounge at 4 p.m. tomorrow with another edition. Tomorrow we'll be chatting with Grant Hall on the theme of well-being. In the meantime, if you'd like to see more about what's happening here at Mod, head to the website mod.org.au or our Facebook and Instagram. And just quickly, a big thanks to everyone you haven't seen on screen today who's been working hard on the show. Thanks to Kat, Claudia, Samuel, and Benny and Becky. See you, everybody.